In his best-selling book Principles, Ray Dalio uses a chapter to talk about a 5-step process he uses to get anything he wants in life. And I've already made another video about the system, but I wanted to try and take another angle to explain it because I really just love the system, and explaining it again and finding new ways of visualizing it helps me as well in my own life. So let's get right into it. The most crucial part of this system is that the 5 steps it is made of should be seen as independent from one another, but executed in the right order. If you skip over a step or go back and forth between different steps, you won't get the most value from the system. You should put your full focus on each step, one by one, and only when you're fully done with one, move on to the other. Implementing these 5 steps through a virtuous loop will yield results almost every time, as long as you stick to the system. So the first step of the system is called having clear goals. And again, remember, we're working on each step individually in a circle, so here the only thing we want to do is identify and clarify our goals. I encourage you to write goal ideas as you follow along the video, and little by little, with each subpart of the first step, you'll cross out items that don't qualify as goals. The first most important concept to understand here is called prioritization. Prioritization at its core is very simple. It's saying this thing has all my attention and these other things don't. But in practice, it's a lot more challenging because distractions always get in the way, and depending on your personality, you might also change your mind a lot. So with that in mind, the second part of having clear goals lies in understanding the difference between goals and desires. A goal is something you want to achieve because it inspires you. A desire is something you want for no clear reason, and that usually gets in the way of your goals rather than getting you closer to it. The next part about having clear goals: never rule out a goal because you think it's unattainable. When you write down your goal ideas, always remember that there is always at least one best possible path. And what you think is attainable is only a function of what you know at the moment. For instance, I never thought I'd start making money as quickly as I did writing online, and now that I'm here making some money, I can see that there is a whole new horizon of business opportunities waiting for me that I had no idea about before. And in the same spirit, remember that great expectations create great capabilities. Don't limit yourself to what you know you can achieve. The more you seek to achieve, the more you'll get the skills to achieve. I learned so much while creating my own business, and I would have never gotten that far if I had said, oh, I don't have the skills to get started. Remember, you get more skills as you move along. And finally, for the last item of part 1, knowing how to deal well with your setbacks is as important as knowing how to move forward. When bad times come, learn to identify whether to minimize your rate of loss or simply to let go and move on. So once you've done all this, you're ready to tackle the second step of the system: identify and don't tolerate problems. So life is just a big sequence of problems, one after the other, right? You solve one problem, you get another one right after, and another one, and so on. And just like you wrote your goals in the first step of this video, I encourage you to write down a list of problems for each goal that you came up with in step 1. And the thing is, you should view each problem you encounter as an opportunity to better yourself, to move your project forward, or at least to learn from your mistake. This is a very powerful concept that applies to any area of life, and on that note, I highly encourage you to read The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama and Howard C. Cutler. The next subpart of identifying and tackling your problems is: don't avoid confronting problems because they are rooted in harsh realities that are unpleasant to look at. Acknowledging your weaknesses is not the same as surrendering to them. In fact, it's the first step towards overcoming them. Don't mistake a cause of a problem with the real problem. For instance, I can't get enough sleep is not a problem but a potential cause. I am performing poorly in my job could be an underlying issue. And finally, distinguish big problems from small ones. And this one goes back to prioritization from step 1. You have limited time and energy, so make sure you invest those in the problems that will yield the biggest returns when fixed. So now that you've identified your problems, you're going to have to diagnose them to get at their root causes. This is very challenging to do, and it will be one of the most time-consuming steps. Focus on the what is before deciding what to do about it, or put what before how. Ray Dalio writes that a good diagnosis typically takes between 15 minutes and an hour, depending on how well it's done and how complex the issue is. Make sure you identify the root cause properly before choosing what to do about it, because that's something we'll take a look at in the next step, step 4. The second subpart of step 3 is to distinguish proximate causes from root causes. Proximate causes are typically the actions, or lack of actions, that lead to problems. And a very simple tip to identify those is that they are often described with verbs. For instance, I missed the train because I didn't check the train schedule. Check is the verb we're looking at here. Root causes run much deeper, and they're usually what you want to focus on. They're typically described with adjectives. For instance, I didn't check the train schedule because I am forgetful, and here the adjective is forgetful. You can only truly solve your problems by removing their root causes, so make sure you always focus on those. If you don't work on the foundation, you will solve the issue once and it will come back again and again. So you now have laid out a foundation of goals, you've looked at what problems are standing between you and your goals, and you've analyzed and diagnosed these problems to look at where they come from. The second to last step is about designing plans that will get you around the problems. So essentially it is taking a first look at how to solve them. Remember that there are typically many paths to achieving your goals, but you only need to find one that works. And this again goes back to prioritization. Just because you identify multiple paths doesn't mean you have to take all of them. Only focus on one and put all your energy into this one. The third subpart of designing a good plan to solve a specific problem is accountability. Studies on accountability have repeatedly shown that it increases your chances of success by a lot. In fact, the American Society of Training and Development did a study on accountability. They found out that being accountable to someone bumped up your likeliness to succeed to 65%. If you hold specific accountability appointments with someone, your chances jump all the way up to 95%. So accountability is very important. The fourth and last subpart of this step is to recognize that it doesn't take a lot of time to design a good plan. The execution is the hardest in 99% of cases, yet most people either never thought of a plan in the first place or they keep changing their plan as they move along, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to drive the car as you're building it. Build the car first and then start driving, because it will be a bumpy ride in most cases. And now for the final step. Do what is necessary to push through the plans to get results. Basically, this part is about bundling everything together and getting into action mode. Always remember that great planners who don't execute their plans go nowhere. Planning is only half the battle. It takes a lot more than that to win at the game of life. And in the same way, practice without talent beats talent without practice. And this goes back to getting the skills as you go, as we saw in step 1. Something else to remember is that in a modern world filled with technology, good work habits are vastly underrated. Especially in the corporate environment, hyper-productivity is praised more than anything else, even if it leads nowhere. The truth is, you don't need 20 meetings a day to get things done. You need checklists, fewer emails, and more focused time at your desk. Finally, just like habits are important, establish clear metrics to make certain that you're following your plan. The Wheel of Life approach is my favorite on a personal development level, and this approach is essentially about dividing your life into key areas, setting up specific targets for each, and then putting them into action on a realistic timeline, rather than tackling everything at the same time. So that's it, that's the system. Remember, always follow the steps in order and don't go back and forth between steps. Only move on to the next once you're 100% done with the one you're working on. If this feels a little overwhelming, don't worry. Nobody will be excellent at each of the 5 steps presented in the system above, because nobody can think well in all the ways the system requires. For instance, some people will be good at analyzing and diagnosing, but terrible at executing. Some people will be great at planning, but bad communicators. Some people have strong self-discipline and others have close to none. And that's why it's very important to stay humble and get help from others when necessary. Nobody ever succeeded 100% on their own without the help of anyone else, and that's the great paradox of individual success. Teaming up with others is the only way to get there. Even with the best plan in the world, most people won't have all the skills required to achieve it, and you'll find that there are only 2 ways to get those missing skills. Number 1, learning them yourself, that's time consuming, or number 2, getting them from others, which requires humility. Finally, if you're having trouble identifying goals because you're not sure what your passion is in life, or what drives you, then I encourage you to always experiment with new projects and to talk to as many different people as possible. It will help you get inspiration and ideas and hopefully set you on your own path to personal success. And always remember to never discard a goal or an idea because it sounds too crazy. There is almost always a way, and no matter which path you decide to take to get there, remember to enjoy the journey. So thanks a lot for watching, have a good one, see you next week. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed.